Hey, everybody. Welcome to month 5 of Cooking with Plants. Tonight, we're talking all about adding flavor to our plant-forward meals. I'm Kelly Wilson, and I'll introduce myself more in a moment. But before we get started, just want to make sure if you want to use captions, you know how to do that. If you go up to the 3 dots on the top of your screen where it says more, you go down, you click on that, it'll say language and speech, and then you'll have the option to turn on live captions, and you should see words populate right on your screen. That's how you do that. You are muted, your video is off, and that's not because we don't want you to participate and engage with us during class. It is because we're recording this meeting tonight, and having everybody's videos on makes it harder for us to put out a clean recording. So if you do have a question, you do want to interact with us, there is a Q&A feature. Again, you can find that at the top toolbar on your screen. Please drop your comments and your questions there. If your question is relevant to what we're doing in class tonight, Abby, my colleague who's here with me answering questions, she'll interrupt me and we'll answer it live in class, or Abby will type a response to you. If it's a more personal question, we would encourage you to email us at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and we'd be happy to get you information and point you in the right direction. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Kelly Wilson. I am a registered dietitian here in our lifestyle medicine department at Trinity Health Ann Arbor. I'm board certified in lifestyle medicine and a registered dietitian. And for those of you who don't know, lifestyle medicine is a specialty within medicine that is focused on disease treatment, reversal, and prevention through 6 key pillars. So nutrition, which we cover in these culinary classes, is one of the pillars. Finding joyful movement, so ways to move your body throughout the day and through exercise. Social connection, stress reduction, restorative sleep, and avoiding risky substances are the other pillars. So our team, who you'll meet in the next slide, we focus on engaging with patients in each of these 6 pillar areas, providing information and skill building to help you live your best life. We focus on that whole person care. I also have some education in culinary genomics, which is a fancy way of how the art of cook and science of cooking influence your genes. And I do have a background in organic farming. I was a farmer for a handful of years, so you may hear some seasonal tips on some of the ingredients that we use in some of our classes when I put that hat on. I am really excited to be teaching these culinary classes because I believe that anybody can cook and that you don't need fancy ingredients or fancy tools to make food taste good. So hopefully these classes will give you some basic tools and tips and ideas for adding more flavor like we're doing tonight and more plants to your plate. So like I mentioned, I'm not the only one on our lifestyle medicine team. Here is the rest of our team here at Trinity Health Ann Arbor. Abby in that first picture is here with me tonight, helping behind the scenes and answering questions, which I'm really thankful for. And then Clisty in the dark hair and purple top, and Laura in the brown shirt. They both work in our diabetes program. Lisa in the red is our director, and then Dr. Lou and Dr. Daniel are on the far right of your screen, and they are our physician partners within the hospital. So like I said, tonight is month 5. Can't believe it's already been 5 months of working with you all. And we're talking about flavor. So we're going to focus on spices, herbs, and dressings. If you missed any of the other classes in our series, or you want to register for future classes, scan that QR code that's on your screen right now. Just open up the camera on your phone, hold it up, and you should be able to scan that QR code. It'll take you to the class website. That is where all of our recordings of the classes live. It's where slides and resources, recipes from each of the class live. Today's resources, recipes, and recording will be posted after class. So you won't see a page for May's class, but all the other classes are there. There's also a link on that website to register for the future classes. So again, scan that QR code. And if you miss it and have a problem, again, email us lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. So today's class, we're going to be talking about the flavor families, what makes flavor, and what factors influence flavor, some techniques for adding flavor to your dishes, and then we're going to do some recipes. So we're going to do 3 different salad dressings, or they could also be dips depending on how thick you wanted to make them. We're going to do a substitute for mayo, or just like a spread, and roasted veggies. And if we have time, we'll just do a really basic hummus recipe. Okay. And then, like I said, the class website will have all of the recipes from tonight's class, after class slides, the recording, and then there's some handouts and additional information on using herbs and spices. We also have a video from our farm team, and about planting herbs. And so that'll be at the end of tonight's class and also on the class website. Right. And just before we go ahead and get started, just want to offer up this disclaimer. So this class focuses on general nutrition and health, not necessarily disease reversal or treatment. So I do use ingredients like olive oil and salt in some of our recipes that might not be warranted for certain health conditions. So if you have a specific health condition you've not received direct education about from your physician or a dietitian, please do that before you make any drastic changes, omitting or adding certain foods to your diet. That being said, this class series focuses on plants. Most people, for the most part, unless you have a condition, say like chronic kidney disease, could add as many fruits and vegetables into their diet as you want without issue. But please talk to your doctor or your dietitian if you have a new condition, again, that you haven't received specific education on yet. So with that, let's go ahead and get started talking about flavor. So this slide shows you the 5 flavor families, which I have to practice saying a lot because it is a little bit of a tongue twister. If you want to have some fun, try saying that 5 times fast. And food tastes really good to us when all 5 of these flavors are balanced, okay? So bitter, this is something you might experience when you eat like coffee or you have black tea. If you've ever gotten a salad mix and you've seen little like red bits that almost look like cabbage, but they're a little bit more tart or like make you kind of pucker up a little bit, that's radicchio or chicory, and that has a bitter flavor. And some people experience some leafy greens as having a bitter flavor. Bitter is the flavor that we are most sensitive to, because if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, a lot of bitter compounds are poisonous. And so we developed heightened awareness of bitter so that if we were potentially starting to snack on something that was poisonous, we'd pick up on it before we ate enough to cause harm to ourselves. Now, coffee, tea, chicory, radicchio, those foods aren't poisonous to us, but they do have that bitter flavor. Sour, so this adds sparkle and brightness, and this is where you might find citrus like this lemon here, or even pickled and fermented foods can add a sour flavor. Umami is sometimes described as like meatiness or savoriness. And these are the flavors that have like really robust mouthfeel. And so you could think of things like yeast or fermented foods like miso, mushrooms, sea vegetables. Those are all going to have that umami kind of flavor. And when a dish kind of tastes bland, feels like it's lacking depth, umami is that flavor that's often needed. So you can add that depth of flavor with some of those foods that I mentioned. Salt is a universal flavor enhancer, and things like soy sauce, we're going to use coconut aminos, which is an alternative to soy sauce tonight, though that adds saltiness. Capers, olives, things like that would also be ingredients that would add that flavor. And then sweet is an additional flavor enhancer. And we use things like honey, maple syrup, some vegetables, particularly root vegetables or winter squashes, would be considered kind of on the sweet side, and we'll use some of those in a recipe today. And then there is one flavor family that some folks might also include, and that would be spicy or pungent. So think of like chili peppers or fresh ginger wasabi. So now that we know what these flavor families are, how do we use that knowledge in our cooking? Okay, so knowing each of these 5 flavors, you can taste food and determine how you can enhance a dish to really make it shine. So bitter, you can add bitter ingredients to a dish to help balance out saltiness, balance out that umami kind of flavor, and balance out sweetness. Sour, and so I guess an example of that bitter, let's do that. Balancing out, say, sweetness would be raw cocoa powder in a dessert, right? So that the bitterness of the raw cacao is balanced out by the sweetness of the sugar that's in that dish. Sour, you can use sour to balance bitter, spicy, and sweet. So an example of this would be lemon juice on, say, sauteed Swiss chard, for example. Some people experience chard as being a little bit more of a bitter green. The lemon juice helps to decrease our perception of bitterness and enhance our enjoyment of that meal. Umami balances bitter and enhances sweet. So you could think of like nutritional yeast on broccoli. Some people experience that as like a broccoli as a bitter taste. You're adding some umami with that nutritional yeast, and that's helping balance that out. Salty, like I said, that's the universal flavor enhancer. It balances out sourness and enhances our perception of sweetness. So if you've ever had a sea salt chocolate chip cookie, you totally know what I'm talking about here and how that enhances your experience of sweetness for that cookie. And then sweet balances out sour, bitter, spicy, and enhances our perception of salty umami. You can think about this, another example with Swiss chard, which is kind of a bitter green. Caramelized onions become kind of sweet, and that sweetness of the caramelization of the sugars and the onions balances out a little bit of the bitterness today. And we're gonna do something with some caramelized onions too, so you'll get to experience that in one of our recipes. And so in addition to the 5 flavor families that just exist, there's a lot of other things that influence our perception of taste and flavor. First and foremost would be mouthfeel. So this includes things like temperature, texture, and astringency. And temperature, you can think of like coldness actually suppresses our ability to taste certain things, particularly sweetness. And you can think about how temperature influences our enjoyment of a meal too. So you don't want hot soup on a day like today when it was like 75 and sunny necessarily, but you might experience the flavors of that hot soup more pleasantly on a cool day where you're bundled up in a sweater. Okay, texture influences our experience of flavor. So you can do an experiment on yourself, shred a carrot, chunk up a carrot, slice up a carrot, and see if you notice any difference in your experience of that dish. Astringency is kind of when your mouth like puckers up, and that's often related to tannins in things like tea and wine or walnuts would maybe give you that astringency, and that influences how we taste as well. And then smell is probably the biggest one. It's responsible for up to 80% of what we taste. And I'm sure, we've all had head colds before, right? And when your nose is stuffy and your sinuses are plugged up, it really diminishes your ability to taste the food in front of you. So smell and taste are very intimately connected. And then finally, there are these things kind of called I like to call them like the X factors that also influence our perception of the meal in front of us. So visual presentation, like this image on the screen with the waffles have flowers and fruit and they're, you know, beautifully stacked on this plate, can really change how we think about the flavor of the food in front of us. We do eat with our eyes. So thinking about presentation and varying your shapes that you're of the things that you're cutting to put on your plate, or varying the color of things, can really enhance our enjoyment of a meal. Emotions can influence flavor of food. So I have a friend who is from Chile, and she went back recently, and she was describing to me, she's like, I eat the same things when I'm in the United States as I do back home, but the food just tastes so much better back home. And she was reflecting that a lot of that was just the people she was around, and this feeling of being home and that sense of comfort, and that just influenced her perception of that food in front of her. Spirituality, like a gratitude practice, and reflecting on the connectedness of all things, can help us really savor a meal and experience the flavors more fully. And then seasonality. So you're going to get a peek into the farm through the video. And the farm here at the hospital has a lot of really wonderful fresh produce through their CSA. And that produce, or produce from any local farm, is picked at peak ripeness. And so its flavors have been able to fully develop, unlike something that was maybe picked, you know, slightly early before it was fully ripe and then shipped across the country, and then the flavors developed either sitting on the shelf or, you know, being gassed to develop those flavors. Your perception of that flavor is going to be very different. Think of a great example would be like a strawberry from the grocery store versus like a June, Michigan fresh strawberry from the field. No comparison, completely different flavor profile. So consider those things too when you're building your meals and you're thinking about flavor. So how do we add flavor to our meals? There are a handful of different ways, and we're going to do some of these in our recipes today. So first and foremost, you can use aromatic vegetables. And these are things like, so aromatic, smelly, strong flavor. That's kind of what that means. So these would be things like onions and garlic, celery, peppers, carrots would be all considered aromatic vegetables. And you can think about, like, a lot of cuisines around the world use a combination of those vegetables as the base for a lot of dishes. And so those aromatic vegetables are really good to use as foundational ingredients. You often start by dicing them and sauteing them in either some water or a little bit of fat to bring out the flavors and the volatile oils, and that creates this really wonderful flavor foundation for dishes. So using those types of vegetables at the start of your cooking process can really go a long way. You can also use them simmered in broth or, you know, water to make a broth and extract their flavor that way. Second, different cooking techniques can change the flavor of a food, right? So there's a lot of science behind cooking, and, you know, we're going to do a roasted veggie recipe today. And if you've ever had like steamed broccoli versus roasted broccoli, you know that there's a difference, right? There's definitely a reason why we'd want to steam our vegetables sometimes. It keeps certain nutrients, some bioactive compounds in particular, intact. And so, you know, we definitely want those in our system. But also, roasting our vegetables caramelizes some of the sugars that are inherently present in those foods and enhances our experience of the flavor sometimes. So if that's going to increase your enjoyment and get you to eat more vegetables, great. Roast your veggies, steam some every once in a while too, so you're getting a mix of different nutrients. Condiments are another great way to add flavor to your dish. So I'm thinking things like kimchi, which is typically a fermented cabbage dish, but can be really any vegetable. And kimchi just kind of means condiment. salsas, tomato sauces are really good. And then if it's a cooked tomato sauce product, you're getting lycopene, which is, yay, another added benefit. And then nutritional yeast, we've used that in some of our recipes. That adds, when fortified, B12, and then that cheesy umami kind of flavor as well. So that can be a great way to add a little punch to dishes. And then using veggie stocks or broths that you've made yourself when you're cooking beans and grains can infuse a lot of those flavors that typically come from those aromatic vegetables into those grains and add, again, a baseline flavor that's a little bit higher than just like plain water. So that's another way to kind of up the foundational flavor of your dishes. And finally, I think this is what everybody thinks of when they're thinking about adding flavor, right? Spices and herbs. So spices are really like the seeds, bark, flower, root parts of a plant. And then when I'm talking about herbs, I'm talking about the leafy parts of plants typically. So just keep that distinction in mind. And we'll talk a little bit more about herbs here. Next slide. So we're going to talk a lot about herbs and spices in our recipes. We're going to be using a lot of herbs in particular tonight. And we've definitely used a lot of spices throughout recipes in this class. So feel free to go back and reference some of our other recipes. And then you will have a handout that goes through, I think it ends up being about 20 different herbs and spices that you may want to stock your pantry with, kind of foundational spices and herbs. And the handout goes through all the health benefits of those as well. So the general health benefits, though, of herbs and spices, they're a really great way to add a ton of flavor without adding sodium. So not everybody needs to worry about their sodium intake, but if you're somebody who needs to, using spices and herbs instead of the salt shaker can really be a really good way to not miss out on flavorful, joyful food without having that sodium added on. And then the biggest thing, health benefit with spices and herbs, is that they're a really highly concentrated source of bioactive compounds that are really, really powerful at tamping down our body's inflammatory response. So there is this pathway in our body, you can look it up here, it's NF-kappa beta, that is part of our body's immune response, right? And when this pathway is turned on just a little bit, so think about like when you get a scratch on your hand and that area gets inflamed and red, that's great. We want that inflammation to happen because it's our body's protective mechanism against outside foreign invaders. When that pathway is turned on because we're stressed out emotionally, or there are things in our physical environment that are causing physical stress on our body, that pathway can, the switch can be held down and it can cause a whole host of problems. Inflammation is the root of many chronic diseases. So anything we can do to support our body in tamping down inflammation is going to go a long way in helping us treat, prevent, and reverse chronic disease. So spices can be a really good supportive partner in that process. And then one technique to help extract some of the bioactive compounds from spices, you may have seen in recipes where it suggests to roast your whole spices in a dry pan or in a little bit of oil before you add some of the other ingredients. This is called blooming, and it is actually a process that does help release some of those bioactive antioxidant compounds and enhance the anti-inflammatory and health benefits of that dish for you. So just a technique to keep in mind. All right, so now we get to the fun part, and we're going to go ahead and get cooking. So I am going to turn off my slides here and turn on my camera for my cutting board. So let me just get out of this real quick. So I promised that we were going to make 3 different salad dressings. Our very first one is just a basic lemon parsley dressing. So a basic rule of thumb for salad dressings are that it's 3 parts oil to 1 part acid. Today we're using olive oil as our oil and lemon juice as our acid. You can use a whole host of things. You could use orange juice as your acid. You could use white vinegar. Or, yeah, you could use like sesame oil as your oil. You can swap in and out a lot of different things based on, you know, what kind of dish you're using this with. You will have a basic chart on the website that kind of gives you some suggestions for different oils and different vinegars to add together. So you want your oil, you want your acid, and then you want some flavor enhancers, so spices, herbs, aromatic vegetables like garlic to kind of round it out. You may want a little bit of salt and then a touch of sweetness to balance out the sour from the acid. So we've got, for our recipe, we're going to start with a 1/3 cup of olive oil. I'm just pouring that in here. We've got a little less than a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, a teaspoon of salt. It's going in here. I have got a teaspoon of maple syrup for a little bit of sweetness. And then we are going to add a clove of garlic. So we're going to mince this together really quick. It's still got the paper on it. And so what I'm going to do to help peel it easier is I'm going to take the flat part of my knife and press down with the palm of my hand, kind of splits the garlic clove, and then I can peel it much easier. And then mince, if you see that on a recipe, that just means get into small little pieces. And for those of you who haven't been with us, just want to review knife holding. So this is a chef's knife. It's got a rounded tip here, trying to get it into the camera. I'll hold it up here, rounded tip. I'm going to pinch it between my thumb and my first finger and then wrap my other 3 fingers and the rest of my hand around the blade. So my thumb and my first finger are holding that blade steady. And then I'm going to take my other hand and make kind of like a C to keep my fingertips out of the way of the knife. Okay, so I'm just going to make little slices here on this garlic and just going to kind of go back and forth, gathering it together. So like I was saying, mince just means get in really, really small pieces. And for something like a salad dressing, unless you really, really love garlic and you want, you know, big chunks of flavor, you probably want to mince this pretty well. We're just mixing it today in a bowl, but you could use an immersion blender, which we'll use for another recipe, and that would chop up the garlic really finely, and you wouldn't have to worry about knife skills so much. I'm just going to go over this one more time. Looking pretty good. Mincing also helps us infuse flavor throughout dishes a little bit more evenly, getting into those smaller pieces. So it's typically something that's done with really flavorful foods like garlic and ginger, which we'll also use a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. So 1 clove of garlic minced is going into the bowl. And then our final ingredient is parsley. So I've got a nice, beautiful bunch of parsley here, and it's about the time for parsley. If it was planted like earlier, you could maybe get some parsley right now, fresh out of the garden. I just sliced off the stems because I don't want too much of that. I'm looking for about 1/2 cup of minced parsley. So I'm just gonna get my bunch together. I'm kind of rolling, and I'm just gonna hold it with my non-cutting hand, and I'm making this rocking motion. You can see the tip of my knife is on the cutting board, and I'm just going up and down, rocking back and forth as I'm pushing with the hand that's not holding the knife, the parsley towards my knife blade. Okay, and then I'll just kind of use my fingers to gather it together. And I'm making my slices fairly close together because we're mincing here, so I want this to be really fine. And I'm just going to kind of go back and forth. Chopping fresh herbs will make a little bit of a mess, so just note that your knife's going to be a little coated with herbs and it gets stuck to your fingers a little bit. But the flavor results are totally worth it. And the health benefits are totally worth it too. Like parsley is a really great source of apigenin, which is one of those bioactive compounds that kind of turns on this master antioxidant pathway in our body. So it's a really potent anti-inflammatory. And then it's also a really good source of vitamin K, like 2 tablespoons chopped meets your recommended dietary allotment of vitamin K. And vitamin K is really great for blood clotting, like so keeping us blood from clotting too much, and for bone health as well. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Things are looking pretty thin. I want to go looking for about a half cup. That's kind of looking close to me. Maybe a little more. I'm going to do about 2/3 of that. Dump that in here. Again, I'm not being totally precise and perfect because remember, recipes are suggestions. You don't have to be 100% exact unless you would like to be. Okay, so now I have got my bowl here and I'm just gonna whisk this together to kind of emulsify, whoops, making messes already. Emulsify all of my ingredients. Okay, and there you go. There's your salad dressing. So this will keep in the fridge for maybe about 5 days or so. It's best used fresh, but some of the garlic flavors will definitely develop a little bit more as it sits in the fridge. It's definitely garlicky. So if you don't love garlic, maybe use half a clove instead of a full clove. So that is salad dressing numero uno. Our next dressing, just going to pause real quick and wipe my hands because, like I said, the parsley kind of gets a little everywhere. Our next dressing is going to be a creamier salad dressing. You could also make this a dip if you wanted to. It uses tahini as a base, which is ground up sesame seeds. This is what tahini looks like. If you're looking at my cutting board, you can see that it's kind of brown. It's a little bit thinner than peanut butter. Stick that in here. You can find tahini some grocery stores have it in the nut butter aisle, or you'll often find it in the aisle with world flavors. It's typically with other Mediterranean or Middle Eastern ingredients. And it is a little bit bitter. The sesame seeds, if you've ever had sesame seeds, you may have experienced the bitterness of them. So we do have a good amount of lemon juice. We used half cup of tahini and we're using equal parts of lemon juice, about half cup, that's going into our bowl here. So that acid from the lemon juice is going to help us balance out the bitterness of the sesame seeds and the tahini. So we're just going to mix this together. And this is like one of my favorite things. It kind of, I don't know if you all can see that really well, but it kind of almost curdles and gets a little lumpy. Maybe you can see it better there. Are you able to see it better on that one? Okay, yeah. And as you continue to stir it, the consistency changes. That's kind of a fun. I always think that's fun. All right, so we're mixing that together. You can see getting nice and creamy here for us. We've got about a half teaspoon of garlic powder going in here. We are going to add a touch of salt. Stir that. And then I've got a little touch of maple syrup. Again, that sweetness is going to help balance out a little bit of the bitterness from the tahini. You could totally leave it out. you don't have to add that in here if you don't want to. So this is pretty, you can see it's pretty thick. This would be a really good drizzle on some falafel balls, or maybe to coat some roasted vegetables in. If you want to use it as a salad dressing for like some greens, then you definitely want to add the water that's part of this recipe. So I've got a couple tablespoons of water that I am going to add at a time. So there's actually 4 tablespoons of water total I've got in my bowl here, which is 1/4 cup, but I'm just going to add it a couple tablespoons at a time. Okay, that's kind of starting to get thinner, but not quite like a pourable salad dressing. So I'm gonna do this. This dressing is also really good as like a pasta salad dressing. So if you want a creamy dressing instead of like a mayo-based dressing for making a summery pasta salad, which we're almost there to summer. So exciting. This is a great recipe for that. Okay, so you can see how that definitely thinned out. So I almost used that full 1/4 cup of water, and that's about the consistency that I would want. So that's our second kind of creamy dressing. Again, grain bowls, grain salads, or not grain salads, green salads, or like a pasta salad, all really great applications for that. Right, and our last little dressing is full here. So we've got a green salad dressing, and actually I'm going to, whoop, there we go, clean cutting board, just like magic. We are going to use an immersion blender for this one. So this is a really handy tool. Abby, could you hand me the stick part of it? I don't know. It's in the box over there. So this is a really handy tool. This is the motor part of it. Here, look at. And there's a stick typically that attaches to this with a little blade on the bottom that is really great for mashed potatoes, for soup. Something, if you want to stick something in a pot, an immersion blender is really helpful for this. So this is what that stick part looks like this. So not a tool that you have to have in your kitchen, but definitely a really helpful tool if you're making dressings or soups and you want them to be smooth. Thank you so much. And this immersion blender comes with this handy dandy little attachment. So it's like a little mixing bowl, little mini food processor that just goes right onto a blade like that. So pretty cool. So we're going to use this for our next salad dressing because well, if I can get it back open, there we go. Because we're using some fresh herbs that I want to be really finely mixed together. So this is a green dressing, maybe like a green goddess kind of dressing, if you will. We've got a 1/4 cup of cilantro. So we're just using the leaves of that cilantro, and it's been finely chopped. And we've got a 1/4 cup of parsley that's going in here. Parsley, I use some of the stems too. And the reason with cilantro why I avoid using too much of the stems is it can be a little bit more bitter. We've got a 1/3 cup of water going in here. And if you're somebody that you don't love the flavor of cilantro, if you experience it as soapy, you could totally sub in any other green herb into this if you wanted to. You could do a combination of mint and dill, for example. So maybe an 1/8 of a cup of dill, an 1/8 of a cup of mint, and you'd still get a really nice, flavorful dish here. Or you could just do all parsley if you like that flavor. So I'm adding in some lemon juice. I've got about 2.5 tablespoons. Pinch of salt. I've got a teaspoon of coconut aminos. And again, coconut aminos is also adding a little bit of saltiness for me, but it's adding a little bit of sweetness too. So coconut aminos is a lower sodium version it's a lower sodium alternative to soy sauce, made from the nectar from coconut flower. So it is a little bit on the sweeter side. And then I've got 2 cloves of garlic that are going in here. So I'm gonna stick that all in here. Give it a stir. Most immersion blenders have a little lock button that you definitely need to hold down in order to be able to press the on button. So there's usually just the 2 buttons, lock, unlock, and on. So we're going to turn it on. And oh, you know what? I forgot one crucial ingredient, which is why it's looking pretty watery on us here. So let's get that out. You definitely want some type of fat in this, and you could use avocado if you wanted to. I opted for using some cashews. These are raw cashews, unsalted, unroasted, because I don't want any of the unhealthy peanut oils or things like that. And we already are using salt in here, so I don't want to add more salt. You could, if you wanted to, soak these in some warm water and a little bit of salt for about 15 to 20 minutes. If you don't have a high-powered blender, soaking them will make sure that the pieces get really fine and you get a smoother consistency for your dressing. I don't mind it being a little chunky, and I like to take shortcuts, so I didn't soak these. So we'll see how it turns out with this immersion blender. It's going to taste just as good. The texture might just be a little bit different, but remember, texture influences flavor, so you might enjoy a smoother flavor and want to soak those cashews. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this going. Okay, let's see how that's looking. Get those whisked back off. It's pretty good. So this is like a nice creamy green dressing. And again, if you have a higher power blender, this may be a little bit smoother consistency. You can keep blending this. Again, I don't mind it having a little bit more texture to it. It's totally up to you and your personal preferences. I blended that probably for about 30 seconds. You could totally do it longer if you wanted. So we've got a couple more recipes. Our next one, let's do our spread. So this recipe, our next one, is a spread that you could use in place of, say, a mayo if you wanted to. And it's chock full of really beneficial ingredients. So this recipe is from Genomic Kitchen, which is where I learned a lot of my knowledge about genomics and how the food that we eat influences our genes. So if that's something that you're really excited learning more about, the Genomic Kitchen's a really great resource. She has a book. She has a bunch of courses online that you can take. You don't have to be a health professional to take them. She has a lot of classes focused on the general public. So highly recommend checking out the Genomic Kitchen. So this is one of her recipes. We are going to also make this in the immersion blender. And this recipe includes 1 cup of edamame. So these are shelled soybeans, fresh green shelled soybeans. These were previously frozen. You want to cook edamame before utilizing it. This is 1 cup that I microwaved with a tablespoon of water for 2 to 3 minutes. You could totally saute it if you don't have a microwave or don't want to use a microwave. It's cooled. That's an important factor too. It was cooked, but then it was cooled. So I'm dumping that in here. I have got some fun facts about the soybeans, the edamame. You're getting B6 from this, which is really helpful for melatonin and serotonin production. so good mood and restorative sleep. And it's really important in our methylation pathway, so ensuring that all the genes in our body are functioning properly. So edamame, tasty, lots of health benefits as well, and a great source of protein. We've got some fresh ginger. Okay, the recipe calls for about a teaspoon of minced ginger. I kind of chopped it because I'm going to put it in this immersion blender. And I see somebody was asking about the Genomic Kitchen information. I'll link it on the website too, so you all have access to that. And the website will be, if you didn't get to scan the QR code, will be shared in the class follow-up email as well. So look for it there. All right, we've got a little bit of salt that's going in here too. We've got a clove of garlic. And we are going to add some lime zest. So this tool right here is a microplaner, and this is really good for zesting citrus. And zest adds if you've never used it before, it just adds another level and layer of brightness to a dish, slightly different than adding just the straight juice, which we will be using as well. So I'm going for, what am I going for here? I'm going for about a teaspoon, I think, of zest. Yeah. So I am just gonna go back and forth on this. Typically, if I'm gonna use zest of a citrus fruit, I try to opt for organic if I can, just because I'm using that outer rind that comes in contact with the pesticides and chemicals. Totally not necessary, but that is just often what I choose to do. And then I don't worry about it so much if I'm just using the juice from the inside of the lime. Okay, so it looks like, if you can see here, I've got a nice little pile of zest. It smells wonderful. I wish you all were here to smell this yummy brightness. All right, so we've got that added in to our dish. Now we're going to add, I've got 3 tablespoons of lime juice that's going right in here. And we've got some avocados. The recipe calls for 2 avocados. I have 2 really big avocados, so we may only use 1.5. We'll see what works here. So let's talk about cutting avocados. So typically cutting avocados, I like to set the long side of the avocado down on a cutting board, take my knife and at the top where the stem is in, and slice until I feel the pit and I feel the resistance. And then I just twist the avocado around my knife while I'm continuing to press my knife into the pit. Okay, and then you can twist, and there we go. We've got our avocado halves. And to remove the pit, I keep my avocado on the cutting board, take my knife, slice it into the pit firmly, and then twist. Oh, there we go. Twist, and it comes right out. Okay. All right. And then I'm gonna just make some slices here to make it a little bit easier to scoop this out. Bring our immersion blender. Avocado, when you eat avocado, not only is it delicious and you're getting some good healthy fat, you're also getting a lot of magnesium and a lot of fiber, believe it or not. I think we think of avocados as just being, healthy fat, and they are, but they're also a really good source of fiber, which, remember, fiber is so important for so many things, for gut health and good mood, for keeping us full, for keeping our digestive system working properly, our bowels working properly. Okay, so my little immersion blender is full, so we're going to stop with 1 of those giant avocados for right now, and then we might add a little bit more. Let's get that in here. Okay, so let's blend away again. Oh, you know what? I lied. I lied to you. I got too excited. There's one more crucial ingredient. We've got some mint. So we're going to set this aside here. got some mint. So I just wanted to show you quickly. We need about 2 tablespoons for this recipe of chopped mint, so not a whole lot. I'm going to take the leaves off the stems. You can do that by pulling down, by pinching. I just end up kind of pinching the top. We don't want the stem bits. They're tough and it's not where the flavor is. So this is probably enough here. I'm going to take the leaves and I'm going to kind of stack them on top of each other and then roll them into like a little bundle here. Okay. And then I'm going to thinly slice, or this is also called chiffonade when you get these lovely thin little pieces. These are great for garnishing dishes or mixing into your green salads. I think adding fresh herbs into your green salads, like your parsley, your cilantro, your dill, your mint, and just kind of tossing it with your greens is a huge way to boost flavor pretty easily. So I chiffonaded that pile, and then I'm just kind of going over it to mince it up a little bit, do some of the pre-work for that blender. And I want 2 tablespoons. That's going to be about, about that much right there. So I'm going to put that into pile. Got a little bit of extra. That's okay. It's just going to make the room smell good for us. Knife over here, get the lid back on our immersion blender. And let's blend. So again, press the unlock button. Okay, and I'm just blending this until it is a smooth consistency. And we've got a lot of ingredients in here, so it's going to take just a minute to get blended up. And like I said, this spread is really brilliant for a mayo substitution. So if you are a sandwich lover and you like flavorful spreads on your sandwich, highly recommend trying this recipe. This is a recipe that you could also thin down again with a little bit of olive oil or more lime juice or some water. And you could use it as a dressing, or you could keep it thick and use it as a dip for veggies as well, kind of like in the vein of hummus. So let's away. See where we're at here. We're getting pretty darn close, but I don't want to keep you. So this is kind of what we're going for with the spread. Okay, so it almost looks like guacamole in consistency, and that kind of makes sense because a lot of this is avocado, right? So we're gonna set this aside. Sake of time. I would probably blend that for another like 30 seconds to a minute. But I don't want to make you listen to the sound of the blender for any longer. So we're going to move on to our very last recipe, which is roasted veggies. I apologize, we're not going to probably have time to get to the hummus, but the recipe will still be online. So if you want to try your hand at making another yummy spread or dip hummus, which is chickpea based, you can go ahead and find that recipe. So we are going to do some roasted veggies. And remember, I mentioned cooking techniques can really change the way something tastes, right? So think of this as a sweet potato that I've chopped up. This is a typically a sweeter, what we would experience as a sweeter vegetable. It's got a lot of residual sugars in it. When we roast it, those sugars caramelize and our experience of sweetness increases. So roasting can be a really nice way to enhance some of those yummy flavors. We are going to use za'atar spice. Go over here on our roasted veggies. This is a Middle Eastern spice. It's very bright. There's typically sesame seeds in here and sumac, which adds like a lemony brightness to this as well. I am going to clear our roasting tray. So this recipe has parsnips, which is this right here. This is in the carrot family. You may see these in season in the early spring. They're typically planted this time of year and harvested in the fall, held over. So we're going to peel this parsnip. The recipe calls for 2 parsnips. We're just going to work on 1 right now. And parsnips have a lot of fiber and vitamin C in them, which I'm sure you're well aware vitamin C is such a great thing for immune health. All right. I'm going to trim this end off, and then I am cutting this parsnip into uniform size pieces. So the most important thing when you're roasting veggies, I'm going to also cut this stem end off of here too, is to get your pieces into similar sizes so that everything cooks at about the same time. Okay, so I've got those pieces on my tray. Oops, I got one a little bit big. And again, I'm not worried about the shapes being perfectly the same sizes. As long as they're close, you're going to be just fine. Okay. And you can use the same technique with pretty much any hearty vegetable, broccoli, cauliflower, all sorts of different things. Brussels sprouts are also in here. I've already chopped up a few, but what we're going to do is just trim the stem, or excuse me, yes, this is where it connects to the stalk. We're going to trim that part off, and then you'll have some leaves, outer leaves fall off. That's totally fine. We want to peel those away because those have been exposed to the outside world. To get about the same size as my parsnips, I'm going to cut this Brussels sprout probably in quarters. Add that to my tray. Just do that with these. Pull off these outer layers. And then we're also doing a red onion. So the recipe calls for 1 whole red onion. You want to peel those outer papery layers off of the red onion, and we're going to cut the stem end off here. And then we are going to make slices. So we're doing slices for this recipe, not mincing like we've cut onions before. So you just follow the lines in the onion and space your slices. Try to keep them as evenly far apart as possible. And you're not cutting all the way through to the root end. You're leaving a little bit of space so that these slices don't flop all over the place as you're going around the onion. Okay, and then once you've made all your slices, trim off that root end, and then you just break those slices apart onto our sheet tray. If you don't have a sheet tray, you could also use like a casserole dish. It just might cook, like a glass pan. It might just cook slightly differently. We got that on here. And then prior to class, I chopped up a sweet potato and some other Brussels sprouts. And so we're adding that here. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of lemon juice on top of this. Those onions are getting my eyeballs right now. We are going to add about a half a teaspoon of garlic powder on here. I've got about a tablespoon of oil. We're going to roast this at 400 degrees. So you wouldn't want to use an olive oil for this application. You would want to go for more of an avocado oil, which has a higher smoke point. And then I've got the za'atar seasoning, and I'm going to sprinkle that on top. I'm going for about half a teaspoon as well. And again, this does have one of the primary components of za'atar is sumac, which pairs really nicely to enhance kind of that bright sour flavor with the lemon. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I'm just coating, stirring to coat. I stick this in the oven 400 degrees for about 35 minutes. And then when I take it out, it looks just like this. Nice and beautiful. Those onions have caramelized. The sugars and those sweet potatoes have caramelized. So this is a really flavorful, tasty, really easy too dish. So with that is our final recipe, and we are at 7:30. I did also just want to share the class website again. So I'm going to pull up the screen with the QR code for that class website. And you can, if you need to, go ahead and scan that. Oops. Oh, I'm going to have to click all the way through. Sorry about that, folks. Oh, there we go. Oops. There we go. So go ahead and scan that QR code. Again, hold up your phone camera to that. It'll take you to the class website where the recipes and all of the resources from tonight and previous classes exist. And then please take a few minutes to scan that QR code on the left and take our survey for the classes. I know that the surveys are very similar each month, but it really does make a big difference for us when we're talking to people in positions of power who get to make decisions on whether we can keep doing these classes or not. Your opinions really make a big difference, and they help me make sure that this class is meeting your needs. And I've already made adjustments based on your suggestions. So please take a moment to fill out that survey and give us your valuable feedback. And then I am going to play a quick clip. If you want to stay on the line, go for it. If not, this will be posted on the class website as well. But again, our friends at the farm, they shared a fun little video about planting herbs, since they knew we were talking about flavor and talking about herbs. And they just wanted to give you some tips if you wanted to grow some herbs for yourself this growing season, how you might do that. So here's that quick little clip. And before I play that, I'll just say good night and thank you to all of you who joined us this evening. I really love being here in these classes with you, and thank you for your time. And I hope that you learned something. If you did and you try something new, please email me. I always love to hear from you all. All right, take good care. Have a wonderful evening.